Jack Marshall's journey to Ilaria had not been of his choosing. It began on a crisp autumn evening in New York City, when the sky above Central Park split open with a burst of shimmering, unearthly light. He had been walking home from a long day at work, headphones blaring music as he tried to drown out the stress of his mundane existence. Then, without warning, the air seemed to pulse, vibrating with a frequency that made his bones hum and his vision blur. Before he could even scream, a force like a giant hand had pulled him upward, ripping him from the familiar ground and flinging him into the void. The last thing he saw of Earth was the park's golden leaves scattered like confetti in the wind. Darkness swallowed him, twisting his stomach into knots, and then, light. He had awoken to the breathtaking sight of Ilaria, a planet suspended in a sky where moons drifted lazily and constellations danced like living things. Floating islands of crystalline rock were tethered to the ground by glistening vines, and vibrant alien flora spread out in all directions. The air was sweet and heavy, infused with a scent he couldn't quite place, something like crushed jasmine mixed with ozone. That was the start of his nightmare, though he didn't know it yet. It wasn't long before he was found by a squad of Ilarian guards, all of them strikingly beautiful females with shimmering blue skin and eyes that glowed in the twilight. They had looked at him with an odd mix of curiosity and suspicion, and before he could explain himself, he was shackled in sleek, alien restraints and brought to the Grand Court of Ilaria. Now, standing in the courtroom, he wished he had paid more attention to his mother's advice about minding his own business. But even she couldn't have warned him about accidentally offending a society of powerful female aliens. The courtroom itself was a marvel, an architectural dream of crystalline beauty. Its walls shimmered with a soft, bioluminescent light, creating a rainbow of colors that seemed to pulse in harmony with an unseen rhythm. The ceiling arched high above, like a luminous dome embedded with constellations that swirled and shifted, forming ancient stories known only to the Ilari. Jack stood in the center of it all, painfully aware of how out of place he looked, a mere human trapped in an alien spectacle. The panel of judges known as the Ilari sat in a crescent formation before him. They were elegant and intimidating, each one a vision of ethereal splendor. Their skin ranged in shades of blue, some dark as a midnight sea, others pale as glacial ice. Their hair shimmered like woven starlight, flowing down in waves that seemed to defy gravity, and their robes were woven from iridescent threads that shifted color with every movement. The High Arbiter, a particularly imposing figure with sapphire-colored skin and eyes like molten jewels, regarded Jack with a gaze that could freeze a volcano. Her voice rang out, rich and resonant, carrying an authority that made the air around her feel heavier. "Jack Marshall of Earth," she pronounced, the words echoing throughout the courtroom, "you stand accused of desecrating our most sacred ritual grounds. Your offense is no minor transgression. Do you understand the weight of your actions?" Jack's throat went dry, and his pulse thundered in his ears. I don't understand," he managed to say. "I was just there. I didn't mean to hurt anyone or anything." His mind raced, trying to recall what he could have possibly done to deserve this. But the more he thought about it, the less he understood. Everything on Ilaria was so alien, so confusing, and he had been lost, overwhelmed by the planet's bizarre beauty and strange energies. The High Arbiter's gaze darkened, and a ripple of disapproval spread among the watching crowd of female Ilari. They had gathered in their hundreds, each one a vision of otherworldly beauty, with luminous eyes fixed on Jack. Their collective stare made his skin prickle. "You desecrated the grove of the star lilies," another judge announced, a teal-skinned Ilari with silver eyes that gleamed like a predator's. Her voice was smooth, almost mocking. "The most hallowed ground in Ilaria. There life and desire are inextricably woven. By disturbing the sacred blooms, you disrupted the natural flow of energy that sustains our rituals." Jack's heart sank. The image of that moment came rushing back, the lush garden filled with glowing flowers, their petals opening and closing like breathing lungs. He remembered being mesmerized by a particularly stunning bloom, a star lily with petals so radiant that they seemed to hold the cosmos itself. Without thinking, he had plucked it, fascinated by the way the light dimmed and the petals wilted in his hand. He had thought it was just a flower. But apparently it was so much more. The High Arbiter leaned forward. "The star lily," she explained, her voice reverent, "is a symbol of fertility, the embodiment of our life force. Its desecration is an act of sacrilege, a disruption of the energy that binds us as a society." Jack's stomach churned. He had never been religious, But he understood the concept of sacredness, of violating something cherished and irreplaceable. Yet the implications of what he had done were staggering. "Please," he said, his voice cracking. "I had no idea. I'm so sorry. Isn't there some way I can make this right?" The judges exchanged glances, and for a moment Jack dared to hope that his plea had reached them. But when the High Arbiter spoke, her expression was as unyielding as stone. "There is a way," she said, "but it comes at a cost." Jack held his breath. "By the authority of this court," she declared, "you are sentenced to receive the desire serums." The room fell silent, and Jack felt his stomach drop. "Desire serums," he echoed, a tremor of fear creeping into his voice. The High Arbiter's gaze didn't waver. "A potent concoction designed to awaken and amplify desire," she explained. "These serums will bind you to our society, making you a vessel for the energies you disrupted. You will serve our people by engaging in our rituals, bringing harmony back to the balance you fractured." Jack's knees nearly buckled. The implication was clear, and a ripple of excitement coursed through the assembled Alari. Some looked intrigued, others amused, and a few gazed at him with an intensity that made his skin crawl. Before he could protest, 2 guards approached. Their armor was sleek and luminous, molded to their elegant, athletic forms. One of them held a crystalline syringe filled with a swirling liquid that seemed to shimmer with its own light. Jack's body tensed, his instincts screaming at him to run, but the silvery cuffs binding his wrists kept him rooted in place. "No, wait," he began, panic rising in his throat. The guard closest to him, a tall, cobalt-skinned female with eyes like emerald fire, gently tilted his head to the side, exposing his neck. Her touch sent a strange shiver through him, and he found himself momentarily entranced by her beauty, the grace with which she moved. "It won't hurt," she murmured, though Jack wasn't sure if she meant to reassure him or herself. The needle sank into his skin, and the serum flooded his veins. A cold sensation spread through him, followed swiftly by an intense, burning heat. Every nerve lit up, and his senses exploded in ways he couldn't have imagined. Colors became sharper, scents more vivid. The air itself seemed to hum with an intoxicating melody, and the presence of the female Alari around him became overwhelming, their beauty almost too much to bear. Desire coiled through him, raw and undeniable. His body was no longer his own. It responded to the alien energy now coursing through his veins, making his skin tingle and his heart pound. The High Arbiter watched him with a mixture of satisfaction and curiosity. "Your punishment has begun, Jack Marshall," she said. "From this moment on, you are bound to Alaria. Your desires will serve our society, and in doing so, you will restore the balance you disrupted." Before Jack could even begin to process this, another figure stepped forward from the shadows at the edge of the courtroom. She was different, her presence commanding yet strangely familiar. Her skin was the deepest shade of midnight blue, almost black, with subtle patterns of bioluminescent markings that accentuated her regal aura. Her hair was like a river of liquid starlight, cascading down her back in shimmering waves. Her eyes were a piercing amethyst, filled with an unsettling mixture of authority and allure. This was Lyria, the prime consort of Alaria, and Jack's new warden. "Come," she commanded, her voice low and resonant, sending a pulse of desire through his already burning veins. "Your fate is now entwined with ours." Jack had no choice but to follow, his body betraying him as it responded to the serum's effects. The world around him had changed forever, and he had become something both more and less than human. His journey on Alaria was only beginning, and deep down, he knew that escape was not just improbable, it was impossible. The world had changed. Jack knew this the instant he stumbled out of the grand courtroom and into Alaria's labyrinthine corridors. The alien planet seemed to pulse around him, breathing in sync with the frantic beat of his heart. The desire serums had begun their work. The air felt charged, vibrating with an electric energy he had never experienced on Earth, and every nerve in his body seemed to hum with a restless, feverish awareness. Alaria was a world of vibrant, overwhelming sensation. Colors were richer, more intoxicating, as if each hue had been infused with liquid fire. The fragrance of alien flowers, sweet, heady, and unfamiliar, drifted on the breeze, and even the soft rustle of crystalline leaves in the wind seemed to whisper ancient secrets. Jack's guide and new warden, Lyria, led him through the maze of corridors. Her midnight blue skin shimmered under the bioluminescent light, and her amethyst eyes held a steady, unreadable intensity. Each movement she made was fluid and commanding, a combination of power and grace that left Jack feeling more unsettled than he cared to admit. He struggled to keep up, his body still reeling from the effects of the serum. "Are you struggling?" Jack Lyria asked, her voice like silk sliding over steel. There was a flicker of amusement in her eyes, but also something deeper in emotion he couldn't quite decipher. Jack's mouth was dry. He fought to control his rapid breathing, the rush of desire coursing through his veins. "What exactly did you inject me with?" he demanded, though his voice wavered, betraying his discomfort. Lyria paused, turning to face him. They stood in an open-air atrium, where shimmering vines hung from the crystalline arches above, swaying gently in the breeze. Stars glinted in the twilight sky, and floating islands drifted lazily in the distance, casting shadows that danced across the alien landscape. The setting would have been breathtaking, had Jack's mind not been so clouded by confusion and desire. "The desire serums," Lyria said, her tone almost clinical, "are a blend of Alarian biochemistry designed to heighten your physical and emotional responses. They amplify desire, both the capacity to feel it and to inspire it in others. Your body is now a conduit for Alaria's energy. And you must fulfill your new role to restore the balance you disrupted." Jack clenched his fists, willing himself to focus. "So I'm, what? Some kind of living aphrodisiac? A tool to be used?" Lyria's expression softened, and for a moment she almost looked sympathetic. But the moment passed quickly. "You are more than that," she replied. "You are an agent of change. Desire is the most potent force on Alaria. It binds us, drives us, and shapes our society. By embracing your role, you will become part of our world's pulse, a catalyst for harmony and renewal." Jack couldn't decide if he was furious or terrified, and if I refuse, he challenged, though he knew the answer already. Lyria tilted her head, her bioluminescent hair rippling like a starlit waterfall. "You cannot refuse," she said simply. "The serums have bound you to our world. The urges you feel will only grow stronger, more insistent. Denial will bring suffering not just to you, but to those around you." Her words struck him like a blow, and Jack realized with a sick feeling that she was right. The desire burning inside him was not something he could resist. It was primal, undeniable, and it scared him more than any threat could. His body betrayed him with each thudding heartbeat, each shallow breath. Lyria observed his struggle, and for the first time she spoke with a note of genuine compassion. "It will not be easy," she admitted, "but you are not alone. I will guide you." Before Jack could respond, they were interrupted by the arrival of another Alarian female. She moved with an effortless elegance, her skin a pale, moonlit blue that seemed to glow in the twilight. Her eyes were a luminous silver, and her expression was serene, though her gaze carried an intensity that made Jack uneasy. She wore a flowing garment that shimmered like crushed pearl, accentuating the lithe, athletic lines of her figure. "Lyria," she greeted, her voice smooth and melodic. "I see you've already begun taming our guest." Her eyes flicked to Jack, assessing him with a cool, dispassionate interest. Lyria inclined her head. "Thessa," she acknowledged. "Jack, this is Thessa, one of our warrior leaders. She will be among those you must serve." Jack bristled, but Thessa only raised an elegant eyebrow. "I hope you're ready, human," she said, her tone hovering between a challenge and a tease. Alaria's warriors do not appreciate weakness. Anger flared in Jack, momentarily pushing back the desire that clouded his thoughts. "I didn't ask for this," he snapped. "I didn't choose any of this." Thessa's expression didn't change, but there was a flicker of something respect in her eyes. "None of us choose our fates," she replied. "We simply adapt." Jack wanted to argue, but his frustration was interrupted by another wave of overwhelming sensation. The desire serums flared to life, sending a pulse of heat through his veins, and he gritted his teeth, willing himself to stay in control. Lyria stepped forward, placing a hand on his shoulder. The touch was gentle, yet commanding, and Jack felt his body respond involuntarily. "Breathe," she instructed. "Control comes from acceptance, not resistance." Jack drew in a shaky breath, trying to focus on anything other than the fire coursing through him. The serene beauty of the atrium, the rustle of the crystalline vines, the distant song of alien birds, it was all a blur, but he clung to it, desperate for a moment of clarity. Suddenly a new figure appeared in the atrium, her presence sending a ripple of energy through the gathered Alari. This woman was striking in a different way. Her skin was a brilliant azure, and her hair was a wild cascade of bioluminescent curls that framed a face full of mischief and intensity. Her eyes, a vivid emerald, sparkled with curiosity and amusement. "Ah, our human guest," she said, her voice playful but edged with something sharper. "I've heard much about you." Lyria's lips tightened. "Melira," she said with a hint of warning, "this is not a game." Melira shrugged, her gaze never leaving Jack. "Of course not," she agreed, though her smile suggested otherwise. "But it is an opportunity, isn't it? A chance to learn, to explore." Jack had no idea what to make of her, but his body responded to her presence all the same. The desire serums were relentless, heightening his awareness of every Illyrian female around him, making it nearly impossible to think straight. Melira stepped closer, her eyes dancing. "Tell me, Jack," she murmured, her voice a seductive whisper, "what does it feel like to be bound by desire?" Jack clenched his jaw, refusing to answer. He wouldn't give them the satisfaction of knowing how deeply the serums affected him. But Melira only laughed, a sound like the tinkling of crystal chimes. "Oh, I like you," she said, her eyes gleaming. "This will be interesting." Before Jack could respond, Lyria stepped between them, her expression cold and unyielding. "Enough," she said. "He needs time to acclimate. We have a festival to prepare for, and Jack must learn his role." Melira pouted but stepped back, her gaze lingering on Jack with a promise of future encounters. "Very well," she conceded. "But don't keep them all to yourself, Lyria. Sharing is, after all, one of our greatest virtues." With that, she melted into the shadows, leaving Jack feeling both relieved and more on edge than ever. He turned to Lyria, 1,000 questions burning in his mind. "What is this festival?" he asked, his voice strained. Lyria's expression softened, but her eyes remained serious. "The festival of mating," she said. "A celebration of our society's unity and vitality. It is there that you will face your true test. Many will seek your presence, and the balance of desire must be restored." Jack's heart pounded. The idea of being the centerpiece of such a festival was terrifying, but he also sensed that it was more than just a ritual. It was a proving ground, a place where his future on Illyria would be decided. "Prepare yourself," Jack Lyria said softly. "Your journey is only beginning. And remember, in Illyria desire is both a gift and a weapon. Learn to wield it, or be consumed by it." With that, she led him deeper into the heart of Illyria, where the festival of mating awaited a world of danger, allure and choices that would shape his destiny in ways he could never have imagined. Jack stood at the edge of a sprawling pavilion, heart pounding in his chest, breath catching at the sight before him. The festival of mating sprawled across a massive open plain encircled by lush, bioluminescent gardens. Illyria's sky was a mosaic of deep purples and shimmering blues, punctuated by floating islands that drifted lazily, glowing from within like celestial lanterns. The air pulsed with a tangible energy, a symphony of scents, colors and sounds that seemed designed to overwhelm the senses. Alien flora bloomed in vibrant clusters, their petals releasing clouds of iridescent pollen that shimmered like stardust. Illyrian females, dressed in flowing garments spun from silken threads of bioluminescence, danced and laughed, their blue skin gleaming under the ethereal light. Music, a blend of lilting melodies and deep, resonant drums, filled the air, its rhythm syncopating with Jack's erratic heartbeat. The desire serums coursing through his veins made every sensation richer, more vivid. Each sound, each scent seemed to wrap around him, tugging at his frayed nerves and magnifying his awareness of the Illyrian women around him. His body felt like a live wire, desperate to act on impulses he struggled to contain. Beside him, Lyria observed the scene with a serene but watchful expression. The prime consort wore an elaborate garment made of shimmering gossamer that left little to the imagination. Her hair, a luminous cascade of starlight, framed her chiseled features. Despite the intensity of the festival around them, she radiated an aura of calm authority. "Breathe," she instructed, her voice steady but soft. "If you let the serums take full control, you will lose yourself." Jack clenched his fists, willing himself to focus. "Easier said than done," he muttered. The desire serums had a mind of their own, turning every brush of air and distant laugh into a tease, a reminder of his body's need. Lyria's eyes, amethyst and piercing, met his. "This is not just a celebration, Jack. It's a test of your resolve and our society's strength." She paused, as if weighing her next words carefully. "You are both guest and catalyst. Your actions here may change more than you realize." Before Jack could process her meaning, another presence made itself known. Thessa, the warrior with moonlit blue skin and eyes like sharpened steel, approached with a commanding stride. Her leather-like armor hugged her athletic frame, and her bioluminescent tattoos pulsed in sync with the music. She looked him over, her silver gaze appraising. "You seem tense," human Thessa remarked, a faint smirk curving her lips. "I hope you're prepared. The warriors of Ilaria are not easily impressed." Jack swallowed, trying not to let his nerves show. "I'm doing my best." Thessa's smirk widened. "You'll need more than your best," she said, her voice teasing but with an edge of genuine challenge. "We value strength, but not just of body. Show us what you're made of." Jack tried to respond, but a sudden commotion interrupted him. A group of Ilarian females burst into laughter, drawing his attention to a nearby platform where a dance competition had begun. The contestants moved with a grace and sensuality that seemed almost hypnotic, each motion a perfect blend of strength and allure. Jack's heart raced, the desire serums pulling at him, amplifying the allure of every movement, every smile. A hand gripped his arm, snapping him back to reality. Lyria's gaze was firm, a silent reminder to stay focused. "Come," she commanded. "There are rituals you must partake in, but we will start with the council's blessing." She led him toward a towering structure made of woven crystal vines, each strand glowing with a soft, inner light. At the top, the Ilarian Council awaited, a group of the oldest and most revered women in the society. As they approached, Jack felt the weight of their gazes settle on him, each one evaluating, judging. "Welcome," Jack Marshall intoned the eldest of the council, her voice a melodic echo. Her skin was a deep, stormy blue, and her hair shimmered like a nebula. "You are here to restore the balance you have disrupted. Do you understand your purpose?" Jack hesitated, feeling the eyes of the entire assembly upon him. I think so," he replied, though uncertainty colored his voice. The council leader's expression softened slightly, but only just. "Desire is sacred on Ilaria," she said. "It is not something to be squandered or taken lightly. You will engage with our people, yes, but you must do so with respect and honor." A sudden laugh rang out, sharp and musical, as a figure stepped forward from the crowd. It was Melira, the mischief maker with azure skin and eyes like glittering emeralds. Her bioluminescent curls bounced as she moved, her smile wide and wicked. "Oh, let the poor human breathe," she teased. "He's been dragged through our world without so much as a chance to catch his breath." The crowd rippled with laughter, and even the council leader's stern expression relaxed. Melira's presence was like a spark, lighting up the atmosphere with her playful energy. She stepped closer to Jack, her gaze dancing with mischief. "Are you ready to explore, Jack?" she asked, her voice a purr. "Ilaria is full of surprises." Before he could answer, Melira grabbed his hand and pulled him into the crowd. Jack stumbled after her, his senses reeling. The music swallowed him up, the scents and sounds merging into a heady swirl. Melira spun him around, her laughter bright and infectious, and for a moment Jack couldn't help but be swept up in the madness of it all. "You have to let go," she whispered in his ear, her breath warm against his skin, "or you'll drown." Jack's pulse thundered, but he forced himself to focus. The serum screamed for him to give in, to let desire consume him, but he gritted his teeth and pushed back. He couldn't afford to lose control. Not yet. Suddenly, a trumpet-like sound rang through the air, signaling the start of the festival's main event. The crowd parted, and Jack found himself standing in the center of a massive, circular stage. Surrounding him were Ilarian females of all shapes and sizes, each one more stunning than the last. The tension in the air was palpable, and Jack realized that this was the test he'd been dreading. Lyria appeared at his side, her expression calm but intense. "Remember," she said, her voice low, "you are not a slave to your desires. You are their master. Prove your worth, and perhaps you will find more than just survival here." Before he could respond, the first challenger stepped forward. It was Thessa, her silver eyes gleaming with challenge. She raised her weapon, a spear of glistening crystal, and pointed it at him. "Show me what strength you have," human, she demanded. "Not with your body, but with your will." The crowd hushed, and Jack felt his heart pound. The desire serums urged him to react, to give in to the thrill of combat and the allure of Thessa's beauty, but he clenched his fists, focusing instead on her words. Strength of will. He took a breath, centering himself, and stepped forward. "I'm ready," he said, his voice steady. Thessa's lips curled into a smile. "Then let us begin." The festival had become a crucible, and Jack was its newest subject. His choices would define his fate, but more than that, they would begin to shape Ilaria's future. And as he squared off against Thessa, with the eyes of the entire world upon him, he realized that survival meant more than just enduring. It meant changing the world he had become bound to, one way or another. The festival's firelight flickered across Ilaria's twilight sky, turning the bioluminescent flora into a landscape of molten sapphire and emerald. Jack sat in the shadow of a massive crystal tree, catching his breath after the festival's first round of challenges. His heart still pounded from his contest with Thessa, who had tested his will with calculated precision. He had barely managed to stand his ground, drawing on every ounce of mental strength to keep the desire serums at bay. "You held your own," said a familiar voice. Lyria stepped out from the shadows, her regal form glowing with an unearthly beauty. Her eyes, deep amethyst pools, betrayed a hint of something Jack hadn't expected: admiration. "Thanks," Jack replied, wiping the sweat from his brow. "But I don't know how much longer I can keep this up." Lyria tilted her head, studying him. "Strength comes from more than endurance. You have something the others lack: resilience." Before Jack could respond, a rustle in the bushes made him tense. He expected another challenger, but instead a figure emerged, one he hadn't seen before. She moved like the wind, quick and fluid, with an energy that seemed to bend the world around her. Her skin was a striking electric blue, with glowing golden patterns that resembled lightning strikes across her body. Her eyes, of vivid green, sparkled with intensity. Lyria, the newcomer, greeted, her voice carrying a note of defiance. "You're keeping secrets from us." Lyria's expression hardened. "Zala," she said evenly, "this isn't your fight." Zala's smile was sharp. "Everything in Ilaria is my fight," she turned to Jack, her gaze piercing. "So you're the human causing all this trouble." Jack stood, feeling the tension between the two women. "Trouble isn't exactly what I had in mind," he replied cautiously. Zala's eyes narrowed, her curiosity palpable. "You don't look like a threat," she said, circling him like a predator assessing its prey. "Yet here you are, disrupting the very fabric of our society." "Leave him be," Lyria interjected, stepping between them. "He has enough on his shoulders without your games." Zala raised an eyebrow. "Protective, are we?" She looked at Jack again, this time with something resembling interest. "How curious." Jack's confusion deepened. "What's going on?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "I'm tired of being left in the dark." Zala crossed her arms. "Our world isn't as harmonious as the Council wants you to believe. There's more beneath the surface: power struggles, discontent. Some of us don't want to follow the old ways anymore." Jack's pulse quickened. A rebellion? The idea seemed absurd in a society that appeared so united, but he could sense the truth in Zala's words. Ilaria's beauty masked fractures beneath the surface, like a flawless crystal hiding a web of hairline cracks. Lyria's jaw tightened. "Zala leads a faction of dissidents," she explained, her voice taut with disapproval. "They believe Ilaria should abandon tradition and embrace a new way of life, free from the old rituals." Zala scoffed. "Don't twist our goals, Lyria. We want freedom from outdated rules, from a council that binds us to rituals we no longer need." Jack could see the fire in Zala's eyes, the passion that drove her. It was intoxicating, in a way that rivaled the effects of the serums coursing through his veins. "So why are you telling me this?" he asked. Zala's gaze grew serious. "Because you're the wild card. The council wants to use you to reinforce their power, but you could be the key to something greater. If you join us, we could change everything." Jack's mind spun. The idea of being more than a pawn, of having a real choice, was tempting. But he didn't know who to trust. Lyria had been his guide, but even she seemed bound by duty, while Zala's rebellious spirit offered something dangerously appealing. "Think carefully," Lyria warned, her voice low. "Zala's path is riddled with chaos. Our traditions may be flawed, but they've kept Ilaria in balance for generations." Zala's eyes flashed. "Balance," she spat. "It's a lie. The Council's rules stifle us, and you know it." Jack felt torn, caught between two powerful forces. The serums made it hard to think clearly, muddling his thoughts with desire and frustration. "I didn't come here to lead a revolution," he said, running a hand through his hair. I just want to find a way to survive. Zala stepped closer, her voice softening. Surviving isn't enough, Jack. Not when you could be the catalyst for something greater. Imagine a world where desire is free, where no one is bound by the Council's dictates. You could help make that a reality. Lyria grabbed Jack's arm, her grip firm but not painful. And at what cost, she demanded. Destruction. Bloodshed? Be careful, Jack. The path of rebellion often leads to ruin. Silence fell between them, heavy with the weight of Jack's decision. He looked at Zala, then at Lyria, and saw the depth of their convictions. Both believed in their cause, but only one could be right. Or perhaps neither were, and he was trapped in a conflict he barely understood. Before he could speak, a sudden noise shattered the tension, a distant explosion, followed by the clash of weapons and the startled cries of Alarian citizens. The ground trembled, and the sky lit up with a flash of bioluminescent fire. Chaos erupted around them, and Jack's heart leaped into his throat. Zala's eyes gleamed with excitement. Looks like the rebellion has begun, she said, a smile curving her lips. Welcome to the real Ilaria. Lyria cursed under her breath. We have to go, she told Jack, pulling him away from the erupting violence. Now. But Zala grabbed his other arm, her grip equally strong. Don't run from this, she urged. Fight with us. This is your chance to choose. Jack's body tensed, pulled between the two women and their opposing destinies. The desire serum surged within him, amplifying his confusion, his fear, his excitement. The festival had become a battlefield, and his fate hung in the balance. Whatever he chose next would change Ilaria forever, and there would be no going back. The once lively festival of mating had descended into a chaotic whirlwind of fire and steel. Jack found himself at the heart of the tumult, the desire serums thrumming through his veins, amplifying every flicker of sensation. The ground quaked beneath his feet, and he could taste the acrid tang of smoke on his tongue as explosions painted the sky in bursts of bioluminescent fire. Lyria pulled Jack behind a shattered crystal statue, her eyes wide but resolute. You must stay focused, she urged, her voice taut with urgency. We're running out of time. Focused, Jack echoed, his voice cracking. On what? I never wanted any of this. The heat of the serums burned him from the inside, making his skin feel too tight and his heart beat too fast. Every nerve screamed at him to act, but he didn't know how. You're more than a victim of circumstance, Lyria said, her grip tightening on his arm. You're the key to our survival or our destruction. Before Jack could respond, Zala emerged from the smoke and shadows, moving with the confident grace of a predator. Her electric blue skin glistened with sweat, and her emerald eyes blazed with defiance. Running, Lyria, she taunted, her voice cutting through the chaos. How predictable. Lyria's jaw clenched, but she didn't rise to the bait. Instead, she kept her focus on Jack. Do not let her deceive you, she warned. Rebellion will only lead to ruin. Zala's smile was sharp, a blade hidden behind her beauty. And yet, she said, turning her attention to Jack, rebellion also means freedom. Do you want to be their puppet forever? She gestured toward the battlefield, where rebels and warriors clashed in a dance of desperation and fury. This is your chance to change everything. Jack's pulse raced. Both women pulled at him, their opposing visions tearing him apart. Lyria represented tradition, the rigid order that had defined Ilaria for centuries, while Zala promised liberation, though it came wrapped in the chaos of revolution. He opened his mouth to speak, but before he could decide, the ground beneath them erupted. An explosion threw him backward, and he landed hard, his vision swimming. When the world righted itself, he found himself staring up at the night sky, where the floating islands above glowed with an eerie, fractured light. A figure loomed over him, a hooded Ilarian elder, her skin an ominous indigo, etched with ancient patterns that seemed to pulse with their own dark rhythm. The High Arbiter. Her eyes were not the warm glow of most Ilari, but twin orbs of cold, calculating light. She stepped forward with an aura of authority that made the air crackle around her. Enough, she thundered, her voice reverberating with the weight of centuries. The battle around them faltered, warriors and rebels alike pausing, as if compelled by the power in her words. The flames stilled, and the chaos froze in place, suspended in an unnatural silence. The High Arbiter fixed Jack with a stare that felt like ice boring into his soul. You stand at the heart of this storm, human, she declared. Your actions will determine the future of Ilaria. You will choose now. The crowd parted as if obeying a silent command, forming a wide circle with Jack at its center. The High Arbiter raised her hand, and from the earth, an ancient stone platform emerged, inscribed with glowing runes that pulsed in rhythm with Jack's heartbeat. He felt every throb, every anxious beat, echoing through his bones. "Step forward," the High Arbiter commanded. "Declare your allegiance to the Council for stability and tradition, or to the rebels for freedom and change." Jack's throat tightened, and he climbed onto the platform, his body trembling. Hundreds of eyes, each glowing with expectation and judgment, watched his every move. The desire serums pulsed, urging him to feel, to react, to let instinct overtake reason. He clenched his fists, struggling for control. Lyria took a step forward, her face a mask of determination. "Alaria's traditions have sustained us through ages of turmoil," she said. "Our world is fragile, balanced on a knife's edge. Choose us, and we can preserve that balance." On his other side, Zala's emerald eyes gleamed with conviction. "Balance," she spat, her voice fierce. "It's a lie. A shackle disguised as harmony. We deserve to live freely, to define our destiny. Stand with us, Jack, and we'll break these chains." Jack's mind spun, both women pulling at his soul with their words. Lyria and Zala weren't just leaders, they embodied the passions that defined Alaria, one a guardian of tradition, the other a herald of upheaval. And Jack, an outsider, had become the catalyst for their struggle. He thought of the star lily he had unwittingly picked, the moment that had ignited this whirlwind. It had seemed so insignificant, just a flower. But now he understood Alaria's beauty was fragile, a facade that masked underlying fractures. It needed more than preservation or rebellion, it needed unity. Jack lifted his head, voice steady despite the turmoil within. "I won't choose between your visions," he declared. His words rang clear, cutting through the tension. "Both of you are right and wrong. Alaria needs tradition, but it also needs change. We can't survive without both." Gasps rippled through the crowd, disbelief and awe mixing in equal measure. The High Arbiter's expression hardened. "You defy us?" she asked, her voice dangerously low. "I'm offering a new path," Jack said, stepping forward. "A way to honor the past while embracing the future. Desire and duty don't have to be enemies. We can build a better Alaria together." For a moment, silence reigned. Then, slowly, Malira emerged from the crowd, her golden hair catching the firelight. She clapped, the sound echoing in the hushed square. One by one, others joined in, young warriors, scholars, even a few council supporters. The applause grew, a wave of cautious hope. But not everyone was swayed. From the shadows, a cloaked figure stepped forward, eyes glinting with malice. "You think unity will save us?" the figure sneered, voice dripping with disdain. "Alaria thrives on conflict." Before Jack could react, the figure raised a hand, and a shard of dark crystal shot forward, striking Jack in the chest. Pain exploded through him, a searing agony that stole his breath. He staggered, vision blurring, and collapsed to his knees. Around him, cries of horror erupted. Lyria rushed to his side, her hands glowing with healing light. "Stay with me, Jack," she pleaded, her voice breaking. Zala stepped forward, fury blazing in her eyes. "Who dares?" she began, but the cloaked figure vanished into the chaos, leaving only a sinister laugh. Jack's vision darkened, but he clung to consciousness, the desire serums raging within him. He felt his heartbeat slowing, the life force of Alaria slipping away, but even as the pain threatened to consume him, he reached for Lyria's hand, then Zala's, drawing them both close. "Promise me," he gasped, his voice barely a whisper. "Promise. You'll work together." Tears shimmered in Lyria's eyes, and even Zala's fierce expression softened. "We promise," Lyria whispered, her voice choked with emotion. Zala's grip tightened around his hand. "We'll honor your vision, Jack," she vowed, her defiance tempered with newfound resolve. Jack felt a flicker of hope, a spark that refused to die even as the world dimmed around him. He had become more than a pawn, he had become a symbol. And as darkness claimed him, he knew that Alaria's future was no longer bound by tradition or rebellion alone. It was something new, something greater. The light faded, but the spark remained, a promise that his choice, his vision, would endure.